All right, welcome to the February 13th meeting of the Richmond School Board. This is our work session. As is customary, will you please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as is customary too, could we have the reading of our statement, or the statement of vision, mission statement and vision.
Richmond Community Schools guides students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
Thank you.
Richmond Community Schools' vision is a community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for lives of choice, purpose, and service.
Thank you. Do we have any public commentary?
We do not.
Moving on to the consent items. We have 3.01 approval of minutes and 4.02 human resources.
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent items as presented.
Motion by Mr. Stevens,
I'd second.
seconded by Mr. Maury. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. On to action items, 4.01 conflict of interest statements.
Great, thank you, Brad. For our first action item, we have 4.01 conflict of interest statements. For this first action item, I'd ask that Mrs. O'Brien present that.
Okay, the following action item is submitted for your consideration. Tonight I come to you to recommend the approval of the Uniform Conflict of Interest Disclosure Statements. Upon approval from the board, the disclosure statements will be forwarded to the State Board of Accounts and Clerk of the Circuit Court of Wayne County.
I move that we accept the conflict of interest statements.
Motion by Member Slifer,
Second.
second by Member Darengowski. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
I do have a question. After I noticed, as I was reading through the conflicts with, and this is, I've seen this in the past, it just never rang. Because there's board conflicts where people are on different boards. Is there a need, since I've been appointed to the Redevelopment Commission, is there a need for me to have a conflict of interest for that?
I can't hear what he's saying.
With him being appointed to the redevelopment board, does he need a conflict of interest form filled out?
No. No. That's it?
Any other questions?
Yeah, it's not really a question, but once I originally had said I don't think I need that, and then I saw other board affiliations, so I have since, I don't think it made it back in, but I have since submitted one as well. For
Yours
mine.
is in there as well.
It's in there now, okay.
Okay, seeing no other questions, all in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
All right, our second action item this evening is 4.02, request to advertise the RFP for third grade academy. I am recommending that that RCS advertise this RFP beginning February 15th, 2019. The Richmond Community Schools will receive requests for proposal for third grade Summer Reading Academy up to 2 p.m. prevailing local time, March 5th, 2019. At the Administration Building at 300 Hub Etchison Parkway, Richmond, Indiana. Academy students will include exiting third graders who did not demonstrate grade level reading proficiency as measured by the iRead 3 in 2019. Academy students may also include exiting second graders who do not demonstrate grade level reading proficiency. The number of second graders selected may depend upon how many third graders need to pass the iRead 3. Our proposals must be submitted with non-collusion affidavits properly signed and executed and filed with me. Facsimile delivered responses will not be accepted. All proposals must be made in compliance with the laws governing such matters, and the board reserves the right to reject any and all proposals or accept the lowest responsible or responsive one, not necessarily the low bid. Detailed specifications and procedures may be picked up here at the school administration building. This evening I ask for your approval for the RFP for third grade academy.
So moved.
Motion by Member Moore,
Second?
seconded by Member Stevens. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Great. Our last action item this evening is 4.03, Civic Hall Fee Schedule Update. And for the final action item, I'm asking Mr. Tidrow if he would discuss this.
All right, thank you, Dr. Reynolds. Board Policy 6510 speaks to the use of our school facilities and directs administration to develop fee structures appropriate with their use. Civic Hall is a wonderful facility that is used by many internal and external customers, and some of the fees listed on the current fee structure for its use have not been revised for some time. The administration recommends that the school board approve the fee structure as shown on the attached permit for use of school property short-term use agreement form. And just as an FYI, the updated or new fees are highlighted in yellow. Those will be removed once or if the form is approved.
The fees will be removed? Who wants to?
The
Just the
highlighted
highlight.
yellow. Yeah, misplaced multiple.
Okay, thank you.
I move that we accept the new fees for the,
Motion by Member Schleifer,
I'll second.
second by Member Moore. Any questions or comments?
I have a question. If a school, say a high school club, wants to use the facility, does that go through the principal, or how would that? I mean, are they a RCS school-related group or partnership?
They usually go through the building administrator, then it goes through the Civic Hall staff, Cindy Kate and John over there, John Cook, so, yeah.
And they would have as equal opportunity as
Sure.
any other group? Thank
Yeah,
you.
good question.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to our work session with the social emotional learning. I do believe we have some presenters.
Absolutely. At this time, I have a crack-notch group of talented educators and Mike available to, I'm just kidding. If they would please come up and join us at the table and have a seat. Up here. I didn't tell Mrs. Polkmeek that she'd have to set up here. She's not very excited about that. In discussion with Dr. Terrell, really wanted to give you an update on our social emotional learning continuum that we have started in Richmond. There's a seat there.
I want Bridget to feel bad that we all sat opposite.
And again, we do have a presentation planned, but also it's a work session, so we wanted the folks to sit at the table and just have conversations. You'll be able to ask questions and get clarification on the wonderful things that are happening and some things that we're looking at implementing. If you recall from the September presentation, I think they're maybe rearranging the screen.
There you go.
It's got a little cutoff. I think it was created with a widescreen. No issues. Kind of to review what Sheila spoke about in September, to kind of to tell you where we started and why. The social emotional learning with the Richmond Community Schools really started many years ago with the Safe Schools grant. And that social emotional learning piece, it wasn't tagged that back then, but it was really talking about the well-being of our students and how we can best serve our students, besides just the classroom academic side. More recently, our research has brought that we looked at the ACEs study, the adverse childhood experiences. Can you go to the next slide, David? Thank you. That adverse childhood experience rubric that talks about how those adverse childhood experiences can adversely affect or hinder the progress of our students. Obviously, we're looking at our office discipline referrals and how that correlates, and then our mental health needs as well. We've partnered with Centerstone for a number of years now, and they are in the trenches with our teachers and our counselors and our administrators, working every day with our students and our families. So, of course, we're grabbing data from them as well. If we could, we have just a quick video to kind of give you a little insight on trauma and how it can affect the brain.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. Stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults. The stress response winds down, and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
So, really, during the 2016-2017 school year, we started working with the county and JDAI, so the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiatives, and really looking at the best way to service our students. Through that program, we got a few folks trained in teaching the teen brain. And we really just started to scratch the surface on some of that new neuroscience research on how to work with students. And at that time, Mr. Morey and Chris Ross, who is currently the assistant principal at Test, were trainers in that program. They conducted a few different sessions during that 2016-2017 school year, really starting to move along that social emotional piece within our district. 2017 February, Sheila Hobbs attended an iCase conference, a special education conference summit in Indianapolis, and heard Dr. Desatel speak about neuroscience and traumatic experiences for our students. Brought back that information, and at that time, Dr. Hartley, Mr. Shunnison, and I really intrigued about how we could move this forward. At that time, we began to work with Dr. Desatel, on working with our elementary principals and essentially their buildings on how we can better support our students through the understanding of neuroscience. Sheila then began building sensory rooms. I think we started with some pilots, and now we've kind of developed those into all buildings. Amygdala reset stations in the elementary classrooms, and again, more special education resource rooms were implemented. And again, I am going quickly. It's because this is really an overview from Sheila's presentation earlier in the year. Fast forward to this year, lots of intentional supports in place. It's really, the state has really taken off with social emotional learning. They have added a division at the Indiana Department of Education, a director, assistant director, I believe is her title, that's facilitating work with schools. Sheila, Mike, and and Corey, I believe, were on a meeting and met with her a couple times via Skype on just some things that we're doing, and some other things that we'd like to do. But we have worked already with Christy Berger, and about to discover some additional resources. And again, you see some of the intentional things that we have set up this year and some additional conferences that we have found for our folks to go to. I thought it was important. I asked Mrs. Polk-Meek if she would come in today. And again, I know that you read the updates, so you see what's going on in our buildings, or you hear some of the things we're doing. But I thought it was really important to have Mrs. Polk-Meek come in and talk about some of the things specifically in her building that they're doing throughout really last year and into this year and beyond. So, Mrs. Polk-Meek, you want to stand up and give us a... No, you do not have to, but I don't know how you can work your Padlet if you don't.
I think you can work it from back there, can't you? Okay, let's do that. Well, thank you for having me. I do want to say a couple of things. When we brought in Dr. Desatel, Sheila had been sure to make sure that we took our behavior specialist. I don't want to leave this meeting without talking specifically about Vicki Sane, and the reason I'm talking about her specifically is because she was assigned to Star Elementary in my first year. So she had been trained with Dr. Desatel, and Vicki brought that back, and it became this process then of implementing some of the things that she had put into place. Stam Koshline was huge in this, and so the community partnership is amazing as well. They provided that initial grant for the elementary principals and the elementary teachers to be trained. And so right from the very beginning, there was community involvement and on respect on the part of the community for the things that we were trying to accomplish with kids. We have, I mean, we're along with all of the other elementaries in the district doing whatever it is that we can to meet kids where they come in. What I want to just show you briefly, and I think you'll probably have a link to this. This last fall, Dr. Desatel reached out to Star Elementary, and she asked a team, myself and Vicki and one of our teachers, to go and speak at the Neuroscience Symposium. Because some of the results that we were getting in relationship to the number of referrals that had gone down, I don't know if I should say this out loud, but I'm going to. We had 699 referrals in my first year at Star Elementary. I'm going to say that again, 699. I jokingly, and it's not funny, said to somebody, well, go ahead and write one more. We might as well round it up to 700. Like it was, and there were a lot of things that precipitated that. It was a new building, new districting, you know, some other things that kind of led to that. We declined in the second year, and we continue to decline. We're down another 37% this year from the year before. So at the end of last year, we ended at 244. What I have, though, is this Padlet resource, because what I think I want, and I hope you'll ask me some more questions, because I talk fast and I kind of go. But this Padlet, this is what we created for the Neuroscience Symposium. Because the thing that I want people to understand the most is that this is a very specific and precise and measured approach to meeting the needs of kids. It is data-based, and it is based on the kinds of data that sometimes, not our organizations in particular, but maybe public ed in general, have taken for granted outside of the special ed world. Down to the moment of the second of the day when children are getting referrals, for example. If I have a child with a pattern of referrals at 11 a.m., then the responsibility of the educators that are servicing that child, no matter whether they've been identified or not, are to make sure that you put the things in place that that child needs at 11 a.m. Down to the moment, and there are examples of that in there, into the resource room, where we could calculate that when kiddos were going into our resource room to do a reset, kiddos just needed a snack, right? And so we found out pretty quickly, because we tabulate that data. Every week I go through that resource room data, I sort it, I can see kids, I can see amount of time. Our team meets, we can say, oh, this kid's, something's changing, what do we do? We also could figure out down to the second that the snack went into the room so the kid didn't have to go out of the room, right? I mean, it is a very measured approach to making sure that kids have what they need in order to be able to regulate. It's really remarkable. I tell people all the time, down to our arrival, the number of reset stations that we have and kids that are pre-identified, with the number of people that are able to meet kids where they're at and to regulate them so that they start their days well at STAR. It's like I tell everybody, it's like a Broadway show. Not that I've ever orchestrated or ran a Broadway show, but as soon as that bus hits, lights are up and everybody knows where they need to be, which kids have already been identified, and how to address and to approach kids who maybe haven't been identified but for whatever reason that day need additional services. We have been very privileged, my team and I, over the last year, to invite other school districts into our building. And so I would love for you to be cognizant of that because of the support of Richmond and the kinds of things that we've been able to implement. Next week, Winchester Community Schools will be visiting Star Elementary to see some of the things that we've implemented. And we've had some schools from Fort Wayne and some other places because of some of the success that we've had. Do you have questions? Yeah.
Can you speak to how you orchestrate all that? How did you, because there were certain entities in your building that weren't communicating it. So how did you get them to communicate so that everybody knew?
Well, and I should have just started all this. I have the most amazing team of educators in the district. Like, and any principal's astounding groups of educators that have stepped forward and put things in place we communicate almost all things digitally at this point. So somebody had mentioned Centerstone before. I really would, it's so, there's so many things. I could be here for 2 hours and I wouldn't even be able to convey to you all of the things that are in place in order for this to happen.
I've allotted 2 hours for her.
Yeah. Good
decision, Chuck.
But so we have communication sheets and it was kind of difficult physically being together as much as we need to be in order to put the things in place that kids need became cumbersome. And so we've digitized a lot of those conversations, and we have our wraparound support services in a digital format that's ongoing. And so we can immediately identify the number of Centerstone's kids that have been put into place, the number of kiddos that are communities and schools, the number of kiddos with the resource room, and we call or coordinate and we tabulate. So it's very clear very quickly that a kid's getting 2 of 4 resources, but why aren't they getting 4? And what else is it that they might need depending on the situation and the circumstance. And then we just do something real simple. It's a spreadsheet and we do comments. And we update those comments and we look at them and we look at the dates, and then I can pull them out and I can see the full range of a conversation for a kiddo.
How are the parents involved with this process? Are they involved?
As much and as often as possible. So any kind of communication and support that is put into place for a parent at Star Elementary or a kid is immediately conveyed to the parent through our staff and through regular communications, through the use of point sheets if that's the appropriate vehicle for a child, through phone calls, support meetings, those kinds of things.
You were talking about the communication sheets or the point sheets. That's usually just something that's done internally, or are the parents involved with knowing when that's going on, or?
They know, and they're sent home. And the request then is that they're signed. And optimally, the very best thing that happens is when those point sheets are created, parents are a part of that decision-making process. Anytime we can get parents in and have a communication about point sheets and behavior plans, we do that with parents as much as possible.
Are these kids just the ones with the IEPs?
Nope.
Or the 504s? It's just anybody?
Every kid.
Okay, what if, I got a lot of questions. Well, just one more, okay?
Yeah.
What if you have a child that's excelling educationally, but you've noticed that some periods of the day he or she gets off task, whether that's being disruptive with others, and it's constantly, you've established a pattern. Now, what I've seen in the past done is, of course, there's a lot of timeout and a lot of that kind of stuff going on, a lot of restriction, in-school restriction, and then it gets to the point where I've seen it where they're wanting to expel the kid from school. Okay, so what recourse does a parent have to help prevent that from happening if they know that that is going on?
Well, now so you asked me 2 questions. I think you started with how would I I'm gonna answer the one that I can
Okay.
answer well, and
Okay.
that is, how do we know about kids and about behavior? And let me show you something. It doesn't matter, and you don't have an elementary that's not thinking about it this way. So you asked me of course, it's gonna, we're gonna go like this, but we have, it's called a data collection form. It's a antecedent behavior consequence comments, and this came from the special ed world. But we would use this for any child, special ed, non-special ed. If we notice that there's a period of time during the day where there is a problem behavior, there's a lack of attentiveness, there's acting out, you name it, whatever that particular behavior is, we employ our paraprofessionals, behavior support people, and they go in and they will script. And they will be very precise about the setting. They will be very precise about the staff that are interacting with the student in that moment. They will be very specific about what happened prior to the behavior. They will script the behavior, they will make comments, and we use that detailed information to put a plan in place. IEP 504, doesn't matter, Gen Ed, that's the reality of a system that works like this.
Could you give us an example of what one of those resets would look like? So, because she'd mentioned like a timeout or an in-school restriction,
Well,
and those are
yeah.
different than.
Sure, and it's there's no standard, because kids aren't one size fits all, right?
Right.
The question always becomes, how many tools do you have in your toolbox, and which staff you have in order to be able to meet the needs of that kid in that moment at that time. What's happened at STAR, which is the most miraculous thing, is those things have started to take place naturally and consistently. They're second nature for almost all teachers and all kids all of the time. These toolboxes of things that either Dr. Desatel or other people have brought to us, Vicki had brought to us about behavior and behavior supports, just happen naturally. We see less and less of the kinds of consequences that we have typically subscribed to kids who aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Fewer of the, timeout, fewer of those kinds of things. More of supporting the child in that moment in a way that's productive for that child.
I'm gonna add to that a little bit. One of the things that we have to help people shift is that there's a place in school for consequences, no doubt about it.
Right,
But a kid has to be regulated to understand the consequence, and then the consequence then to work in advance. And that's a culture shift for teachers and for staff. And I think what Keith knows from the Teaching the Teen Brain, that's part of getting the adults that are working with these kids who've experienced these things to understand that if I send a kid out, I, as the leader or the may sit down and we may have a conversation while we're working while we're working Legos or Play-Doh or something. I'm thinking of an elementary, but we're getting to the bottom of what's really going on. And so now that we've talked about it, you're regulated, you're calm, you still have to go serve your 10-minute timeout, but now you're ready to re-enter the classroom. So, but what we want to do is it's my place, my time, consequence, and then we'll help you regulate.
Right.
So it's a shift, and that's a shift that we've seen at STAR. And so now the consequences aren't having to come because kids are regulating and learning to regulate on their own prior to even having to have an adult intervene.
Absolutely.
This sounds like a really good program. So why aren't we doing this at the high school and at the middle school level?
It's rolling in, and part of this is the rolling in of it. And Keith probably knows more. I know that we've had a lot of people doing the Teaching the Teen Brain, and that's really the older kids. Part of what's happening is that getting people to understand the trauma, the effects on the brain, and understanding that it's over time, that we may not even see any of that manifested until they're middle school. And so it's education. It's just, it's coming. We're seeing it happening, and unfortunately happening naturally at dentists now. Some things are happening very differently there, just because of the circumstances that have happened. But it's happening, and we're trying to teach adults that it's okay to let a kid regulate, and kids can co-regulate each other. And 5 minutes of regulation time can give you 45 minutes of instructional time. And that's hard to give up sometimes. because we're all pressed for standards.
And we knew we had to start somewhere, and the research, and the research shows that the younger brains, that development is critical. You know, and that was the second video that I didn't show. I had another video in there, it was about 2 minutes, but it talked about, you know, the development of birth, before birth to, you know, adolescence, and the development of the brain
And
at
then
that point.
from a nuts and bolts standpoint, so that's why we give a little bit of the timeline. So when Vicky sings and Sheila and Carrie Ann,
Oh,
they,
Whitney Shayro, I can't
and
believe
they
that.
started
Or
doing
like
some of
Care- I mean, there's so
those type of
many.
things. And then, that spring, when the elementary principals got together and they started talking about the STAM coach line grant and things like that, they said, well, we usually kind of go this direction with it, but what if we all take X amount of money and blah, 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 and put it together? And I said, that's a great idea, that's the way we'll do it. And then, but, speaking about the community partnership, Monica called me and she said, well, Corey, I know they usually do this. What would it cost to bring her in and be able to do all of this where they still don't have to give up what they've already done? And so from a pure logistical standpoint, you know, Monica Koschlein was like, well, if you write this, Corey, then they'll be able to do that and this. So we were able to get out in front of things, and we had some initial support and education before the others. And so now those group of kiddos that have first been exposed to it are starting to move up into
Do you
our
find that
secondary.
it's harder to do these kind of things with the middle school and the high school? Since they haven't been taught initially in the beginning? And what about the staff? Are they, I mean, that's
think
a
what
new
you're
process for
seeing
them too.
is it's gonna roll up. It's like everything else that we kind of do. You're gonna see the roll up of it. It's really hard for our kids to accept some of it because their patterns of behaviors are just kind of instilled. And so as this year's fifth graders are kind of demanding that of their teachers, that they have some, and we've been involved in situations where we went over and we were like, hey, last year this is what worked at the elementary. They put it in place and it works, and they're like, oh, wow. So we're seeing it happen kind of as a natural consequence of our kids moving up into the middle schools.
It's ironic that you're saying, and the board members, you just have to cut me off if you want to speak, that you're talking about this, because what I've noticed at Dennis, since the situation happened, is the environment there has changed somewhat. It's, I don't know the right word to use, but it's like people are listening more now, and staff is more in tuned and listening to what the kids are saying more now. Maybe it's because they had a brain shift too, with that kind of thing happening, so it made them rethink about some things that they normally might have taken for granted. And now they're looking at it differently. I noticed that change too. Mr. Laudermilk is an amazing example of that. He's really, I see he will go the extra length for that child, and I really like that, because I've seen him do that with other kids. That's really pretty impressive. Thank you.
I have a couple things, but I think John.
Yeah, we got a couple over here.
Yeah.
I just, specifically probably for Corey, and you may not know this, but resource-wise, I believe Star is staffed heavier, more heavy than the other elementaries.
No, they're pretty equal when it
Are
comes to paraprofessional.
So, and what's student-teacher ratio?
I
If you could maybe get those numbers for all, and send them to us, maybe off.
I think I have them. I think I can do that.
I'd be real curious on the
pretty
student
quickly.
ratio, and then
After
if
we
you think
did
the pairs are about the same.
Yeah, and after we redrew the boundaries last year, it really
even more so this
pretty
year.
level up.
And I will
pretty
speak to that a
levelized
little bit, John, because one of the things that we realized is that Star had so many things in place that our kids from the Norwood area who transitioned back to Crestdale, which is where I was at before, when those kids transitioned back, we saw those kids really starting to struggle there because the same supports weren't in place, because it was a difference in staffing, where Carrie Ann has a master level therapist full-time for Centerstone. Because of the need the previous year, we had backed some out at Crestdale. So we meet around that data, and we made shifts with our behavior specialists. So Vicki Sane is picking up a day at Crestdale because she knew those kids from Star and knew the things that they had in place for them. So so when you look at staffing and some of those things like behavior specialists, we look at that data monthly. I look at that with them, and we will make changes on on their day. If we see that Dennis is having a lot of trouble on a Wednesday afternoon, then we may ask Mr. French to switch his day with Vale and go there on Monday or Wednesday afternoon so that they have some supports in place. So we're looking at that data and making shifts with the adults that we can.
And you know, we're the second highest SES elementary in the district. We're at 90% free and reduced lunch, led only by Vale at 93. And so the trajectory, when you look at a school with those kinds of demographics, number one, we don't make any assumptions about kids' abilities based on that demographic. That's the number one thing, which is why we see the results that we do. But when you look at the number of resources that we have, it's still, and I'm there and I'm loving my people a lot. It's what we have done from 699 coming into the D school, a B 2 years running, and continuing to see a decline and to see an improvement in the quality of life of kids and families as a result of some of the things that we've put in place. The number, and I know Sheila could speak to this, the number of kids, because of the Centerstone support that we were given, that we are able to get into services, and families that have gotten to service has continued to increase exponentially every year. The amount of intakes, I just met with Chris the other day, and the amount of intakes and the amount of support and the overall percentage of kiddos at STAR that receive Centerstone is high. And it's high because of the way that we've put the support in place. I don't know. I just couldn't be prouder of a group of people.
Sounds good.
They're,
To me,
yeah,
sounds
they're
like a great
amazing.
program.
They're amazing.
I have a question for Keith.
Look, okay.
Well, I
No,
want to
you're
know
fine.
about this, I don't know, lack of better word to call it, with the brain
Teaching
thing.
the teen brain.
Yes,
I
want to know about
Can
that.
I come back to it? Well, I'm going to come back to it because it's building around another question that you had.
All right.
And one of the questions that you had earlier was, how is this working in the high school? And I think, or high school and middle schools. A part of the reason that's coming around, and I don't want to take away from the events that have transpired at Dennis, and that has been a huge impact on those folks. But that's not the only, a bunch of those folks at Dennis have taken the teen brain in the last year. So it's a shift in how a teacher thinks about how they run a classroom.
Okay.
And it's sort of like what Sheila said, because as a teacher, there is a tendency to get to the point in the day where you go, look, I've asked you 3 times, I need you to go, okay? And it's really hard to shift your frame of mind to get out in the hallway until you can get this figured out to, why don't you take a break in the hallway so that in 5 minutes from now, when I can get the rest of the class rolling, I can go out there and say, what's going on? Something's up, to get to the problem that's causing the distraction.
So it's like you got to change your way of thinking on how you do things.
You're asking
in
people
order
to
make
change.
that work.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
a lot.
There's a lot of change. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
We have 2 of those sessions that are completely full already. One's going to be next Monday and Wednesday, and another one is going to be in March.
For the class or for the teachers?
For the Teaching the Teen Brain for the teachers. It's throughout the county. Those are all teachers that participate in that. They get a little bit of a gift card.
So you just go there one time, or you constantly keep going to get it reinforced?
No, it's a 6. We push it to 7 because it's hard to get it all. It's a 6-hour course.
Okay.
So we do it in 2 3.5-hour sessions. But Corey George, juvenile, the head of probation, has through the JDAI, Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, he receives grant money that he then to help. That's those grant funds are what sent me to get trained, what sent Chris Ross and Kristen Lumpkin to get trained. So then we come back, and part of that commitment of us being trained was that we will offer that. Yeah. And it's really successful. We've gotten lots of good feedback from that. So, sorry.
No, that's
so
all right.
now I want to go back to because Carrie Ann, you're a rock star.
Yeah.
And the reason,
My staff.
well, the reason your staff is a rock star is because
of
you're
you.
a fantastic leader. So my first question is, how can we clone you to get you, to keep you at Star, but get you into the other buildings? Is there a process where you're sharing, I mean, if you're sharing this, it sounds like it's happening at other elementary buildings as well.
It is, absolutely. And I feel the 6 elementary principals in particular that we're very fluid in terms of sharing resources, and our approaches are very similar to thinking about kids in adversity and trauma and the way that we use supports. I believe that the conversations have shifted from, it's just been an entire evolution for, kids can't learn if they're not ready to regulate. Adults can't regulate. There are days when I have a couple of people that I can use because their schedules are a little more flexible, where we go in and we realize that there are teachers that need a break. Now, this isn't a you're in trouble, take a break, but we find ourselves co-regulating with adults. So our ability to be able to model that and to go in and to co-regulate, or to go in and say to a teacher or to say to a group that have been working in a particularly difficult situation, to give them that time and that privilege to go. And is, you know, one of the things that happened because of the community support that we have is that we were able to redo the teacher's lounge. And I know that might seem a little superfluous, but we have a couple of rules. It's not at all.
Right,
So the
it's
front of it is the workroom, and there's your data. The minute you pass this threshold, it's blue, it's relaxing, we have the cover lights, we have places for adults to be able to regulate.
What'd you put in there this week?
Oh, my PTO put in some lotion and some other stuff, but I mean, like this, you know, the stuff to the same thing that we're asking kiddos to do. We're just, we are working with peers, and we do all, and I think you'll find those similar things across the district with all of our peers. And the way that we share information is pretty fluid. And the big, just take care of your adults too.
Yeah.
I agree.
Because it's tough.
So I guess, and I'd love to get, not now, but I'd love to hear more about your data stuff. And then how can we move some of this data stuff up to the intermediate and high school? Because I think not just the data, but those supports, because the stuff that you're talking about is really vital for folks in intermediate and high school as well.
And you know, like you'll even know, so when I go in on Friday and I have this kind of reflection period, I try to do one every day just to think about whether or not I'm regulating myself. But when I go in and I look at these data sheets, and there are examples in there later, and I'll go through and I'll look at times on specific kids, and I'll look at the resource room, I'm immediately aware of when I know that it's really important for me to be in this room at this time. I'm aware, based on this kid's data over the last week, that teacher could probably use some additional support, even if it's just a tap on the shoulder or a Hershey kiss on the desk or something. Like, so the data, you're right, the data kind of drives. It's a very human thing that we're doing, and it's driven very much by empathy and support for kids. But without that, we wouldn't have been able to do the things that we do at STAR. It's very specific and precise. Yeah. It's a deal.
You could look at our mid-year Swiss data for all 6 elementaries, and knowing what we know about the kiddos that we serve, you'd be amazed. I'm extremely proud across all 6.
Yeah.
I just, Dr. Reynolds, I shared that with him back in January, and I mean, it's absolutely amazing.
It's amazing.
And you think about I liken social emotional learning and those instructional practices like literacy instructional practices. Those aren't tools in your tool bag you typically get in college. You have to go out and seek those tools.
Right, you do.
And the work that our folks have done is pretty miraculous. And the speed in which they have started to make those changes is unbelievable. And that's really at all levels.
Sense of learning.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just like Carrie Ann said, 5 minutes here at a reset is 45 minutes of gained instruction instead of the reverse.
Without a doubt. Well, I'm really pumped. It's crazy
Obviously.
because this is a big, deep hole we can run for a long time.
Yeah.
But what is exciting to me is hearing about what the elementary schools are doing, because I'm floating around and learning more and more and becoming more involved in other pieces. And you've talked about community involvement. I just sat in on something that Rob's been doing for a while. It's the what is it? School justice mental health partnership. And so I sat in on it because of the teen brain stuff that I'm doing. But there's some really good stuff there that I think is beginning to develop as well, that I think can be more impactful for the intermediate and the high school.
I feel like, but I have to say this because I feel like right now our intermediates are getting a bad rap and our high school's getting a bad rap. If you look at the data in those buildings as well, you're seeing a decline. And so people are doing good things. Intermediate kids are a lot harder to do it with because the patterns of behaviors have already been established. So it's not that our people aren't doing good things. It's not that that those things aren't happening at the middle school. They're a lot harder to take hold. They're looking at that data. One of the things that we have talked about doing, and Carrie Ann's going to be really upset a year from now, but we have to look at how we're using our behavior specialist. Vicky's been doing this a very long time, and we are extremely blessed to have Mike French as a part of our staff now as well, who really understands all of that. But we have to then shift our people to help them, put them where their strengths are as well. Our intermediate schools are doing good things as well, and we're seeing the decline in their referrals, and we're seeing an increase in their referrals to mental health services as opposed to consequences.
And they do. I mean, they allow, one of the great things is that the intermediate buildings are really receptive to the principals and teachers at the elementaries following kids. It's not every kid, but it's kind of it's a kind of an impromptu, so to speak, mentor model where they're able to go and visit, come have lunch, and
they're very we share the data.
Intermediates are very receptive, and they are working very, very hard.
And if you look at what Mrs. Baker and Mr. Amix has done with discipline at Richmond High School, it's pretty amazing as well. They really are approachable. You know, we're blessed because Mrs. Baker, I think this group of seniors, she has had them since they were 5th graders. So she has followed them. That's the group she followed over the high school. So she's got a really good relationship with kids and with families. And Mr. Amix just has that about him. That's just who Josh is. But, you know, I mean, it starts with Miss Wolpe. It starts with Miss Brazel. The high school is doing those things as well. And their referrals dropped significantly when they started talking about how to talk to kids differently. How instead of just kicking kids out, let's talk to them. Let's find out what's going on. And the other thing is you build those relationships, and kids in high school are texting or emailing those adults before things precipitate. And so they've developed those relationships with kids that have created a sense of trust, and where they're going to the adults within their building. And then Miss Baker and Mr. Amix are getting out in front of stuff.
If I could, related to the Teaching the Teen Brain, they also have one called Policing the Teen Brain. So we've had all of our resource officers go through that, maybe not the 6 to 8 hours, but several hours, and it has helped with that, not jumping to conclusions a lot of times, and also working with the administrators in the buildings. It also shows that usually male brains don't really form fully form until they're 54 or something, you know, or 27 or so. So yes, but, you know,
got Jeff.
So that explains that.
It's really, it really shows the police the police officers who respond differently with adult, suspects. It's different for your teens and so forth growing up, that sometimes they don't know what they're doing a lot of times, but it helps them as well. And working with the staff is very important too. Let them do the discipline, that upfront stuff, but.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to add too, if I could, in defense of my building, is that, you know, as a secondary teacher, you know, and you've been there yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, is that there's this expectation that when are you going to grow up? And, you know, there's you know, you're gonna go to high school in just a couple of years, and so, but I think what Dr. Desatel really hit on is that when kids are coming to school with all these ACEs, and then the brain development of where it really is that our middle school teachers are really teaching 5, 6, 7-year-olds in 15 and 16-year-old bodies. I mean, you see these young men walking down these hallways who shave, you know, more than me, and and you're trying to treat them like an adult, and they really have a child's brain because of the traumatic different things that have happened in their lives. And so getting teachers to understand, and the response we got from the secondary people after having Dr. Desatel in has been very, very interesting, that the positives of, man, I would like to learn more about this. Can I have more specific examples on, you know, how to deal with certain situations? I think that we're seeing, because they understand that maybe the way I used to work with a kid 15 years ago isn't working anymore. You know, the idea of, hey, I'm the adult, you're the child, when I tell you to be quiet and sit down and get to work, doesn't cut it anymore. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they are the adult at home. Parents are working a couple of jobs, you know, one-parent homes, and so when you know, Susie comes to school and she's been the adult all morning long, getting her younger brothers and sisters dressed and clothed and fed, and then all of a sudden you're telling her what to do, she struggles with that. And our teachers are understanding that that I need to approach that differently. And so one of the things that we're looking at with some grant work and different things is kind of what Carrie is talking about, is having these teams where, you know, when Keith needs to go to the hallway and talk with this kid, we have teachers or staff members on call that they can call the office and say, hey, Mike, will you come watch my class so I can talk with this kid out in the hallway? And having these teams within the building who can really step in. Or Keith is about ready to go nuts because he's got ACEs too. I mean, we as adults have ACEs.
Right.
We come to school some days and Lord only knows what's happening in the morning, or you know, we had one teacher, they were late like an hour to school because of traffic on 70. You don't think that they were ticked off when they got to school that day? And guess what? Second period, when they finally got to school, who took the brunt of that? The kids did.
Yeah.
And so we had to step in and get her calmed down. It's okay that, you know, you were late. But we bring those to school sometimes too. So
Right.
just being more self-aware and understanding, we've come a long way just in the three years I've been here in this corporation. And so, do we have more work to do? Absolutely. But at least we're seeing that teachers are receptive to it, because writing the kid up over and over and over again isn't working.
Successful.
And so being honest with yourself and reflecting, saying, God, I've written this kid up 10 times. It's not working. But guess what? There's some other things, and now we know what those other things are. It's just training the teachers and supporting them and letting them know that we do have some other avenues. And, you know, there is hope, which I'm excited
And
about.
you use every resource you have.
Yeah.
So you take the time to train your secretary and your clerical, and the way that they can, and not just de-escalate kiddos or meet kiddos where they're at, but also family members that come in. My custodian can regulate a kid. Now, there are some kids that he immediately, that responded to him, but he has those skills now in terms of being able to regulate a child should it be necessary, in particular, like in a hallway, if he saw something. It's not something he does all the time, but if it were needed, he could. And, there were a couple of kiddos that asked within their behavior plan that they love him. And they said, would it be okay if one of the things that I earn, or one of the things that I get to do, is to hang out with Mr. Jack for 5 minutes? And so absolutely, you're gonna hang out with Mr. Jack for 5 minutes. I mean, no stone unturned.
I've witnessed that firsthand on a number of occasions there at your school, everything from Mr. Jack to clerical, and standing there in the building in the morning with parents who come in, and for my profession, listening to them de-escalate without de-escalating, and, you know, parents and kids in there who are running late, and a parent who comes in, you know, you don't know what baggage they've encountered, that cause them to be late, but the way that they are handled. You know, and I've witnessed a lot of that, the success stories there at Star. At the same time, for those officers who have gone through policing the Teen Brain, I've seen a complete mind shift of the way that they deal not only with kids now, you know, it's gone to being more communicative and less authoritative. You know, the badge, let's talk this out, let's to an extent, let's think like a child and what a child needs to nurture them and move them beyond the anger or whatever is going on at that point to bring them to a level of understanding. And so I have not had the opportunity to go through the training myself, but for those officers who have gone through it and some of the teachers who I know have gone through it, I've seen a complete mind shift in the way that they deliver in the classroom, the attentiveness that they give to the students, and also for those officers, the way that they deal not only with kids, but now with adults as well, too. So it's a success.
I have to say to you that, you know, when he said he was pumped or hyped or whatever you just said, I kind of was too, but I thought about it, wait a minute, I'm not even in the classroom. But it made me feel like, wow, if everybody takes the type of ownership that you have, that you guys and the team that you have around you, these people around you, to support that, that's going to be so successful. And I just really, really, really appreciate you guys sharing that with me today.
I would be remiss if I didn't say two things. Number one is that teaching people that behavior is just a form of communication. Every behavior is communication. The good, the bad, the ugly, it's all communication. And it's the best the kids got in the situation in the moment. And so understanding that you dig deep enough to find out what they're trying to communicate is important. The other thing that I have to say is that we really have to continue the work that we're doing with secondary and vicarious trauma, because our folks who work with these kids on a daily basis start taking that home at night. They're losing sleep at night. They're losing their own personal well-being because they're worried about those kiddos that they're working with, or it's triggering their own ACEs that they've had. And so we really have to do those things special for teachers that some people think are hokey, some people are but it really is just that little bit extra that you give the adults that you work with to help them understand that it's okay to come in and need 15 minutes because you just got off 70. I drive it every day, and you have to drive in the left lane because the potholes in the right lane are too bad. You know, I mean, that's just part of what we do. And letting adults know, because we've been so demand driven with our adults, letting adults know that it's okay. Like that's adults are harder on themselves than we could ever be as supervisors. You know, they expect more of themselves than we expect of them. And we have to help them understand it's okay. Like it's okay to have a bad day.
You're right.
Carrie Ann, given more resources, training, personnel, activities, what is your biggest need, I guess I'll say?
Well,
yeah, I mean,
Want that alphabetized? Or?
Yeah.
I mean that's
Right.
what our job.
right. I mean this in all sincerity, and I just wanted to make sure I said it if I didn't say it already. It is a privilege to work somewhere. Before people started having conversations about brain and brain research, I've worked for a district my entire career that had behavior specialists for the most part. So it's a privilege to work in a community that before people like Dr. Day-Satel had their work published, they had the Vicky Sains and the others of the world. Because without her and that support and the training that she would receive, I would not have made it through my first year. I mean, just what she was able to bring to us and the way that she was able to bring that to us and support us. We are very supported. I mean, I could give you a list of the other things, obviously, I would always want to have. The thing that I've found as a principal in this district is that the district has always been very responsive to our needs. When we came into that first year and we were floating into December and our referrals were skyrocketing, we began having the conversations about resources and resource rooms, and I immediately found Dr. Hartley and others that over here that were willing to have the conversation about placing things there that we needed. Very sensitive to being able to have that additional title para right now for behavior and behavior support. One of the things that's been critical for us is we have that title para who is able to do a system of check in, check out, to regulate kids, that's there in the morning. I've found this district to be very responsive to the needs. I've never had an opportunity, I've never said I need something reasonable. I mean, you know, I might have asked for something that was unreasonable at some point that I haven't received, because it's based on data and it's based on what's in front of us and it's based on the training. And I think that just the continued support is what is needed. The understanding of the resources and the way that the resources work, doing a walk through the building, and it never happens in the building anymore. It did in the first year, and it was a constant battle, that resource room. Because you could walk by that resource room at 10:15, and you would look in, and it might look like there are 3 adults sitting there, right? And initially, staff would walk by, and they'd be like, well, what are they doing in the resource room? By 10:17, you know, there are 8 kids on breaks, and so just the appreciation. I've felt very supported in the number of Centerstone staff. People have been very responsive. It's been great. Just that continued support at the level that we have now is amazing, and then just the continued training as we need it, and as more research becomes available.
And they make it really easy too. When our building leaders, teachers come to us and say, "Hey, this is a need." Nothing's
And
worse
this
than
is why.
providing they say this is why. Nothing's worse than providing a resource and then it's sitting on a shelf, so to speak. They take it and they use it. Yeah, so they make it easy. And if they ask, we know they're asking for a reason. It's not just it's not fluff. So they make it easy.
David, if you go to that last slide, if you would, or where are we headed? It's not the last one. I have 15 other ones after that. And that kind of gives you just a snapshot of what we're looking at. We're really, to Mr. Weber's point, we're really trying to find those additional resources. As you can imagine, you know, the state's not anteing up more money to us, so we have to continue to get creative on and write grants. The grants that we do get, we are dedicating a lot of those new resources to social emotional learning. And you see there, I won't read to you because we're getting a little long, but those are some of the opportunities that we're looking into for 2019 and beyond, that we just continue, like Mrs. Polkmeek said, that continue to keep this in the forefront at all levels, and realize the impact that this can have any place in our data, whether it's discipline, whether it's achievement data, and what type of achievement data you're looking at, but just keeping that in the forefront. And I think that we have a pretty good plan for the next 2.5 years to do that.
I'm going to add one thing. The state is working, and the great thing is Dr. Desatel, who we have been with since 2017, is sitting at the table. They're creating state standards for social emotional learning. So that is going to be key to helping us create kind of that scope and sequence, Debbie, to kind of be able to carry those things as kids move through the school system. So that is coming, and we keep getting dates as happens many times. But those should be here by the end of the school year, so that we're starting, in August with state standards for social emotional learning.
I had one last question. Going back to the very beginning, what is a courageous classroom?
Courageous classrooms. That is one of the, we took a group to Michigan this past summer, and it was one of the sessions, and it's about kind of owning your classroom, developing a community within your classroom. There was a full session on that. That is not one that I attended, but I can get you that information because I have all of the information from the sessions.
Thank you.
I got to go back kind of to clarify what I heard from you answering John's question. Sorry, but
No, I want more.
but I want well no yeah well what I heard you say, that's what I want to clarify.
Okay.
Make sure I heard what I think I heard. You love your behavior specialist,
Yes.
and everybody needs some of those.
Yes.
Yes. Paras, Title I paras.
Yeah.
You mentioned Title I, but paras are
Yep.
helpful for you, and then continued training. Is that
And Centerstone, that
And
mental
Centerstone.
health piece that we have continued to be able to provide has been huge. And I didn't even, touch the surface. Again, I started something I said something about community support, but, also just all of those initiatives that have started to take root in the building at this point. We have 7 clubs and activities currently. The things that are happening outside of the day, either through teachers who are volunteering, which is typically the case, or community members that are stepping up. We just finished tennis today. And we had this really, if you follow us on Facebook or Twitter, Star, we just had this really incredible moment where we had finished tennis camp and every kid had a parent that came at the end of the day, and every parent picked up a racket. And everybody was, it wasn't always pretty, but we were playing tennis. Mr. Hollingsworth was there, Stu Milligan, and, so all of those things also have helped us to build community. And, we have, there's just so many pieces of it. So that kind of support is also critical as well.
thanks?
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you for
coming.
having
tonight.
Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I mean,
Thank you.
the biggest thing I took away from this is getting the kids to respond positively to different ideas, and the fact that you have the staff buy-in as well as you have, including the janitors. It's amazing, and I really love the fact that you're not forgetting about the staff's needs also, as far as the emotional support for the staff too, because as you guys alluded to, we all have aces, and it's really nice to see that, where you can provide that teacher time to step away for a minute and do what they need to do too. That's really cool.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
All right, we are moving on to board reports and old business. Do you have anything to report, Jeff, on the EDC or?
Well, we had training canceled. I had requested training and wanted to know the processes they use to evaluate projects and those types of things. So I did get a 180-page manual emailed to me that I'll get to you guys, but
You just summarized.
Cliff notes.
but when the training takes place, I'll let you know.
For the cleanups.
Take the white paper, yes.
All right, yes, sir.
We've not really totally established, but I'd like to bring forward the homeschool policy. I don't know if we can get that on the agenda, maybe next meeting. We've talked about it, I think, 2 years ago. I don't know exactly how we.
Homeschool and sports participation.
Extracurricular,
Mhm.
yes. No comment, I guess that's an okay.
No, I think it's a valid discussion.
Thank
I
you.
think the way their documents are, I think any request from any board member, it just takes one person to put it on the docket, so.
Any other items? Okay. Review of upcoming meetings and events.
I think this week you received an email from Mrs. Wolpe, and it just kind of reminded us of all the things that are going to be going on, for the rest of the school year. You'll have all your winter activities wrapping up, but then, we're right into the spring and concerts and performances, and then the honors and awards activities. So get those marked on your calendar and get as many of those as you can. It'd be great.
All right. Well, here's your true test. Do you have a bell ringer?
I do have a bell ringer. I would like to recognize this evening Mrs. Wolpe at RHS. She has been elected again to serve another year on the IHSAA Board of Directors. It's great to have a voice on that panel, and she has a great voice and a great representation for the Richmond Community Schools. Additionally, she was recognized as the District 6 Principal of the Year at the Indiana Association of School Principals
Pretty awesome.
Conference. So I probably not a shock to folks in this room, but well-deserved. A great educator and a great advocate for Richmond.
When was that announced?
I think it was the end of November when it officially came out.
Has there been any publicity on that?
I don't know. Do we have something like this?
The reason I ask, that's something this area needs to know.
She's a pretty amazing woman with all the responsibilities and even organizing that day with the kids from dentists. Just the overall appearance and the type of person that she is. I have never seen her even under stress without a smile on her face. Why are you laughing at me?
It's 100% true. I mean, that's her in a nutshell. I
It
mean,
really
she
is. She's just pretty amazing.
She is.
I was a student when I've seen her mad.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Usually at me.
Say, what does that say about you then?
Usually at me, so. Anyways, anybody else have anything for the betterment of the board? All right, we will adjourn.